My husband called my postpartum body uninspiring during an argument. 3 months after giving birth to his child, those words hit harder than I ever expected. What happened next made me see our relationship in a whole new light. I'm Zoe, I'm 28 years old, and I never thought the man I married would become a stranger who could cut me so deep with just one sentence. 3 months ago, I brought our son into this world, and I thought that would bring us closer together. Instead, it's like I'm living with someone I don't even recognize anymore. Let me take you back to how this all started, because maybe you'll understand why his words hurt so much more than they should have. I met Brandon 5 years ago at a coffee shop downtown. I was rushing to work, late as always, when I accidentally bumped into him and spilled his entire latte all over his white shirt. I was mortified, apologizing over and over, offering to pay for dry cleaning, when he just started laughing. "You know what," he said, grinning at me with these warm brown eyes, "I was having the worst morning, and somehow you just made it better." He asked for my number right there, coffee stains and all. That was Brandon, the man who could find humor in chaos, who made me feel like everything would be okay no matter what happened. We dated for 2 years before he proposed, and those were honestly the happiest years of my life. Brandon was attentive, romantic, always making me feel like I was the most beautiful woman in the world. He'd leave little notes in my lunch bag, surprise me with flowers just because it was Tuesday, tell me I was gorgeous even when I was sick with the flu and looked like death warmed over. When he proposed on the beach where we had our first real date, I didn't hesitate for a second. This was my person, my forever. Our wedding was perfect, a small ceremony with just our families and closest friends. Brandon cried when he saw me walking down the aisle, and in his vows, he promised to love me, in sickness and health, when you're glowing and when you're growing, through every season of our lives together. I held on to those words. I believed them with every fiber of my being. The first 2 years of marriage were everything I'd dreamed of. We bought our little house with the blue shutters, adopted a golden retriever named Murphy, talked for hours about our future kids and how many bedrooms we'd need. Brandon was my best friend, my biggest cheerleader, the person who made me laugh until my sides hurt. When I got pregnant last year, he was over the moon. He'd talk to my belly every night, play classical music for the baby, research the best cribs and car seats with the intensity of someone writing a doctoral thesis. But looking back now, I think the first signs started showing up during my pregnancy, though I didn't want to see them then. Little comments here and there about my changing body. At first, they seemed playful, almost endearing. "Wow, you're really showing now," he'd say, but his tone felt different somehow. Less wonder, more observation. Clinical, almost. When I was about 6 months along, I was getting dressed for dinner with his parents, struggling to find something that fit and made me feel pretty. I'd tried on 3 different dresses and was on the verge of tears when Brandon walked in. "What's wrong?" he asked, but he was looking at his phone, not at me. "Nothing fits right anymore," I said, my voice breaking a little. "I feel like a whale." He looked up then, but instead of the reassurance I desperately needed, he just said, "Well, pregnancy isn't exactly glamorous, is it?" Then he went back to his phone like it was nothing. I stood there in my underwear, 7 months pregnant with his child, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. But I pushed it down, told myself he was stressed about becoming a dad, that he didn't mean it the way it sounded. The comments became more frequent as my due date approached. About my appetite, "Are you sure you should be eating that much ice cream?" About my energy levels, "You used to be so active." About my appearance, "You should probably invest in some better maternity clothes." Each comment was like a tiny paper cut, barely noticeable on its own but stinging more and more as they accumulated. When our son Caleb was born, everything changed. The labor was difficult, 18 hours that felt like 18 years, and Brandon was there, holding my hand, telling me how strong I was, how proud he was of me. For those first few days in the hospital, he was the man I'd married again. Gentle, supportive, in awe of what I'd just accomplished. But once we got home, reality hit like a freight train. Caleb barely slept, which meant I barely slept. I was breastfeeding every 2 hours, my body was healing from childbirth, my hormones were all over the place, and I felt like I was drowning most days. Brandon went back to work after 2 weeks, leaving me alone with this tiny human who depended on me for everything. I tried so hard to keep it together, to be the wife and mother I thought I should be. But I was running on maybe 3 hours of sleep a night, I hadn't showered in 2 days, and I was still wearing maternity clothes because nothing else fit. The house was a disaster, I couldn't remember the last time I'd cooked a real meal, and I felt like I was failing at everything. Brandon started making these little comments again. "The house is kind of a mess," he'd say when he got home from work, stepping over the basket of unfolded laundry I'd been meaning to deal with for 3 days. "What did you do all day?" he'd ask, as if taking care of a newborn while recovering from childbirth was some kind of vacation. I tried to explain how exhausted I was, how overwhelming everything felt, but he'd just nod and say, "I know, honey, but maybe you could try to get into a better routine." Like it was that simple. Like I wasn't already doing everything I could just to survive each day. The breaking point came last Tuesday. I'd had maybe 2 hours of sleep the night before because Caleb was going through a growth spurt and wanted to nurse constantly. I was running on coffee and determination, trying to at least keep the kitchen clean because Brandon had mentioned the dishes piling up. I'd just finished feeding Caleb and put him down for what I hoped would be a decent nap when I walked into the kitchen and saw the breakfast dishes Brandon had left in the sink. It wasn't just a plate and a coffee mug. It was the whole mess: eggs stuck to the pan, coffee grounds scattered on the counter, butter left out to melt, jam jar with the lid off attracting flies. It was like he'd made breakfast and then just walked away, expecting someone else to clean up after him. Something snapped inside me. I was so tired I could barely think straight. I hadn't had a moment to myself in weeks, and here was this mess that would take me 20 minutes to clean up, 20 minutes I didn't have before Caleb woke up again. When Brandon got home that evening, I was feeding Caleb on the couch, still in my pajamas, hair in a messy bun that had probably been there for 2 days. "Hey," he said, loosening his tie. "How was your day?" "Fine," I said, not looking up from Caleb. He went to the kitchen, and I heard him sigh. "Zoe, the breakfast dishes are still in the sink." That's when I lost it. Not screaming, not throwing things, just this quiet, exhausted fury that had been building for months. "I know they're in the sink," I said, my voice steady but cold. "They're the dishes you left there this morning." "I was running late for work," he said, coming back into the living room. "I figured you'd have time to deal with them." Time? I looked up at him then, this man in his clean clothes who'd spent the day talking to adults and eating lunch without someone crying in his arms. "When exactly do you think I have time? Between the 3 a.m. feeding and the 6 a.m. feeding? Or maybe during the 30 minutes he napped this afternoon when I was trying to shower for the first time in 3 days. Come on, Zoe, don't be dramatic. It's just some dishes." "It's not about the dishes," I said, my voice rising. "It's about the fact that you live here too, but you act like everything that happens in this house is my responsibility. I just had a baby, Brandon." "Your baby. I'm doing everything I can just to keep us both alive and fed, and you're worried about dishes." He rolled his eyes, actually rolled his eyes at me, and that's when I knew this fight was about to get ugly. "Look, I work all day to support this family," he said. "I think it's reasonable to expect that basic household stuff gets done." "Basic household stuff?" I repeated. "Brandon, I am taking care of our newborn son 24 hours a day. I haven't slept more than 2 hours at a time in 3 months. I'm still recovering from major surgery." "It wasn't major surgery, you had a normal delivery. My body grew a human being and then pushed him out. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? Do you have any idea how I feel right now?" That's when he said it. The words that changed everything between us. "Look, I'm sorry if I don't feel inspired to help someone who hasn't even tried to get her body back." The silence that followed was deafening. Caleb had finished nursing and was sleeping peacefully in my arms, completely unaware that his father had just shattered his mother's heart into a million pieces. I stared at Brandon, waiting for him to realize what he'd just said, waiting for the apology, the backtracking, the horror at his own words. But he just stood there, looking defensive and angry, like I was the one being unreasonable. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just looked at him for what felt like forever, memorizing this moment, this feeling, these words that I knew would echo in my head for months to come. Then I stood up, still holding Caleb, and walked upstairs without a word. Brandon stayed downstairs. I could hear him moving around, probably finally dealing with those dishes, but he never came up to check on me. Never came to apologize or try to explain. He just let me disappear into the silence. I went into Caleb's nursery and just stood there holding him in the dark. He was so perfect, so innocent, sleeping peacefully against my chest. I looked down at this little person who'd been inside me, who I'd nourished with my body, who I'd brought into the world despite the pain and fear and exhaustion, and I couldn't understand how his father could look at me and find me uninspiring. Uninspiring. That word kept echoing in my head. 3 months after giving birth to his child, after my body had done this incredible thing, after I'd been pouring every ounce of energy I had into taking care of our baby, my husband found me uninspiring because I hadn't tried to get my body back. I stayed in that nursery for over an hour, just holding my son and processing what had just happened. The worst part wasn't even the word itself, it was the casual way he'd said it, like it was obvious, like any reasonable person would understand why he wasn't inspired to help someone who looked like me. Hasn't even tried. Like my body was broken. Like it needed fixing. Like growing and delivering his child had somehow made me less than I was before. Like I was choosing to feel uncomfortable in my own skin, choosing to be tired, choosing to prioritize our baby's needs over making myself attractive for him. When I finally came back downstairs around midnight, Brandon was already in bed, asleep or pretending to be. I sat on the couch in the dark living room, still in my milk-stained pajamas, and tried to figure out what had just happened to my marriage. The next morning, Brandon acted like nothing had happened. Made his coffee, kissed my forehead like always, grabbed his briefcase on the way to the door. "Have a good day," he said, like he hadn't completely destroyed my self-esteem the night before. Like calling his wife uninspiring 3 months after she'd given birth was just another Tuesday night argument. I spent the whole day replaying the fight in my head, trying to convince myself that maybe I'd misunderstood, maybe he didn't mean it the way it sounded. But every time I came back to that word, uninspiring, and the matter-of-fact way he'd said it, like it was just an obvious truth. When he got home from work that evening, I was in the kitchen attempting to make dinner. Caleb was finally napping, and I'd managed to throw something together, hoping maybe we could have a normal evening, maybe pretend like everything was okay. "This looks great," Brandon said, settling into his chair like we were just a normal happy family sitting down to eat. I waited for him to bring up the night before, to acknowledge what he'd said, to apologize. But he just talked about his day at work, asked about Caleb's schedule, complimented the meal like nothing had happened. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "We need to talk about last night," I said. He sighed, like I was being difficult. "What about it?" "About what you said. About me being uninspiring." "Zoe, I didn't mean it the way it came out. You know I think you're beautiful." "Do I? Because last night you told me you didn't feel inspired to help me because I haven't tried to get my body back." I was frustrated, he said, not even looking at me. "You were attacking me about some dishes, and I said something stupid. It happens." "It happens?" I put my fork down and stared at him. "Brandon, you attacked my postpartum body during an argument. You told me I wasn't worth helping because I haven't bounced back fast enough from having your baby. That's not something that just happens. You're blowing this out of proportion," he said, still avoiding eye contact. "All couples fight after having a baby. It's normal." There it was. The minimizing. The dismissal. The suggestion that I was being too sensitive, too dramatic, too unreasonable. Is it normal for husbands to tell their wives they're uninspiring 3 months after giving birth? "I didn't say you were uninspiring, I said I wasn't feeling inspired, to help me. Because of how I look. Because I haven't tried hard enough to get my body back." My voice was getting louder, all the hurt and anger from the night before bubbling up. "Do you hear yourself right now?" He was quiet for a long moment, chewing his food like this was just a casual conversation about the weather. "Look," he said finally, "maybe I could have phrased it better, but you have to admit you've kind of let yourself go since Caleb was born." I felt like he'd slapped me. "Let myself go? You're always in pajamas, you never do your hair anymore, you've gained weight, I had a baby." I said, louder than I meant to. 3 months ago. Of course I've gained weight, of course I'm always in pajamas, I'm breastfeeding around the clock and getting no sleep. What did you expect? I expected my wife to still care about how she looks. And there it was. The truth. Brandon didn't see a woman who'd just accomplished something incredible. He didn't see someone who was sacrificing sleep and comfort and her own needs to take care of their child. He saw someone who'd let herself go, someone who didn't care enough about his attraction to her to try harder. I stared at him across our dinner table, this man I'd married, this man I'd thought would support me through anything, and I realized I didn't know him at all. "I can't do this right now," I said, standing up from the table. "Zoe, don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic, Brandon. I'm being realistic. You think I'm uninspiring. You think I've let myself go. You think I don't care about how I look. And when I try to tell you how much that hurts me, you tell me I'm blowing it out of proportion." I picked up my plate and walked toward the kitchen. "I need some space to think." "Think about what?" I turned back to look at him, this man who genuinely seemed confused about why his words had hurt me so much. About whether I want to be married to someone who finds me uninspiring. That night, I lay in bed next to Brandon, both of us pretending to sleep, and I couldn't get that word out of my head. Uninspiring. After everything I'd been through, everything I was still going through, everything I was doing every single day to take care of our family, I was uninspiring. The thing that hurt the most wasn't just the word itself. It was what it revealed about how Brandon saw me now. Not as his partner who was struggling and needed support. Not as the mother of his child who deserved patience and understanding. But as someone who wasn't trying hard enough to be attractive to him. I started questioning everything. Was I being too sensitive? Was this just normal post-baby relationship stress like everyone said? Were all new fathers this critical of their wives' appearances? Was I expecting too much support, too much understanding? But then I thought about my friends who'd had babies, and how their husbands had treated them during those early months. I thought about my sister, who'd struggled with postpartum depression, and how her husband had been nothing but supportive and loving. I thought about what I would say to any of them if their husbands had called them uninspiring for not bouncing back fast enough from childbirth. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't about one comment or one bad night. This was about respect. This was about partnership. This was about whether the man I'd married saw me as a whole person with my own struggles and needs, or just as someone whose job it was to meet his expectations. Over the next few days, Brandon seemed to think everything was back to normal. He'd kiss me goodbye in the morning, ask about my day when he got home, help with Caleb's bedtime routine. But I felt like I was watching him from behind glass, seeing him clearly for the first time. I noticed how he'd make little comments about other things now. "The house is looking pretty messy," he'd say, not offering to help clean it. "We're out of groceries again," he'd mention, not volunteering to go shopping. "Caleb's been crying a lot lately," he'd observe, not asking if there was anything he could do. It was like he saw all the things that weren't perfect in our life, but none of the effort I was putting in to keep everything together. He saw the messy house but not the fact that I'd been up 3 times the night before with Caleb. He saw the empty fridge but not the fact that I hadn't left the house in 4 days because the baby's schedule was so unpredictable. Most of all, he saw my postpartum body as something disappointing, something that needed to be fixed, rather than something that had done something incredible. I started having conversations with other new moms at the pediatrician's office, at the grocery store, online in parenting groups. I'd listen to their stories about sleepless nights and hormonal changes and the struggle to feel like themselves again, and I'd pay attention to how they talked about their partners. Most of them talked about husbands who brought them coffee in bed, who took overnight feedings when they could, who told them they were beautiful even when they felt their worst. Some talked about the challenges of adjusting to parenthood together, the arguments about schedules and responsibilities, the exhaustion that made everyone cranky. But none of them talked about being called uninspiring. None of them talked about husbands who made them feel like they weren't trying hard enough to be attractive. None of them talked about partners who saw their postpartum struggles as character flaws rather than normal parts of recovery. That's when I started to understand that what Brandon had said to me wasn't just a thoughtless comment in the heat of an argument. It was a window into how he really saw me, how he really felt about me during one of the most vulnerable times in my life. 3 weeks after our fight, I was in Caleb's nursery for his 2 a.m. feeding when I heard my phone buzz with a text. It was from my college roommate, Alexis, who'd had her second baby 6 months ago. "Hey girl, just thinking about you. How are you holding up? I know those first few months are brutal." I found myself typing back before I could stop myself. "Can I ask you something? Did your husband ever make comments about your body after you had the kids?" She called me immediately. "What kind of comments?" she asked, and I could hear the concern in her voice. I told her everything. The fight about the dishes, Brandon's comment about finding me uninspiring, the way he'd minimized it afterward, all the little things that had been building up for months. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. "Zoe," she said finally, "that's not normal. That's not okay. But maybe I am being too sensitive. Maybe I should be trying harder." "Stop. Listen to me. When I had Emma, I gained 50 pounds. I had a C-section, so I couldn't exercise for months. I was breastfeeding, so I was hungry all the time. I lived in nursing bras and sweatpants for like 6 months. And you know what my husband said to me?" I waited. "He said I was the most beautiful I'd ever been because I'd given him his daughter. He said my body was incredible because of what it had done. When I complained about my stretch marks, he said they were proof of the miracle I'd created. When I cried about not fitting into my old clothes, he went out and bought me new ones that fit and made me feel pretty. I started crying then, all the tears I'd been holding back for weeks. That's what partners do," she continued. "They support each other through the hard times. They don't kick you when you're already down. What Brandon said to you, calling you uninspiring for not bouncing back fast enough from having his baby, that's cruel. That's not love." After we hung up, I sat in the dark nursery holding Caleb and thinking about what love was supposed to look like. I thought about my wedding vows, about Brandon promising to love me through every season of our lives. I thought about the man I'd fallen in love with, who used to make me feel beautiful and valued and cherished. And I thought about the man who now found me uninspiring because I was focused on taking care of our child instead of making myself attractive for him. The next morning, I made a decision. I called my mom and asked if she could watch Caleb for a few hours. Then I drove to Brandon's office. I'd never shown up at his work before, not without calling first, but I needed to have this conversation somewhere neutral, somewhere he couldn't just walk away or dismiss me. "Zoe?" He looked surprised and not entirely pleased to see me. "What are you doing here? Is Caleb okay?" "Caleb's fine. He's with my mom. We need to talk." Brandon glanced around the office, probably worried about his coworkers seeing his wife show up unexpectedly looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. "Can't this wait until I get home?" "No, it can't. Because when you get home, you'll either pretend like nothing's wrong or you'll tell me I'm being dramatic. And I need you to actually hear me this time." He led me to a small conference room and closed the door. "Brandon," I said, looking directly at him, "3 weeks ago, you called me uninspiring because I haven't gotten my body back fast enough after having your baby. And when I tried to tell you how much that hurt me, you minimized it and made me feel like I was overreacting." "Zoe, I'm not finished. For months, you've been making little comments about my appearance, about the house, about how I spend my time, like you're disappointed in me. Like I'm not meeting your expectations. And I've been trying so hard to be perfect, to be the wife and mother you want me to be, that I lost sight of something important." He waited. "I lost sight of my own worth. I started believing that maybe you were right, maybe I wasn't trying hard enough, maybe I was uninspiring. But I'm not uninspiring, Brandon. I'm exhausted. I'm overwhelmed. I'm doing the best I can with a 3-month-old baby while my body is still recovering from pregnancy and childbirth. And instead of supporting me through that, you've been criticizing me for not bouncing back fast enough." Brandon was quiet, fidgeting with his pen. "I need to know," I continued, "if this is who you really are. If this is how you see me now. Because if it is, if you really think I'm uninspiring and I've let myself go and I'm not trying hard enough, then we have a bigger problem than one argument about dishes." "I don't think you're uninspiring," he said finally. "Then why did you say it?" I was frustrated. "You were yelling at me about dishes, and I felt like you were attacking me, so you attacked my body. You attacked my appearance. You made me feel worthless at a time when I needed your support the most." He looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to be anywhere but in that conference room having this conversation. "I didn't mean to make you feel worthless. But you did. And when I tried to tell you that, you told me I was blowing it out of proportion. You told me all couples fight after having a baby, like what you said was normal. Isn't it? Don't all couples go through adjustments after having kids?" I stared at him, realizing that he genuinely didn't understand the difference between normal relationship stress and what he'd done to me. "Brandon, normal relationship stress is arguing about whose turn it is to change diapers or whether the baby should sleep in our room or the nursery. Normal relationship stress is being tired and cranky and snapping at each other over little things. Normal relationship stress is not calling your wife uninspiring for not losing her baby weight fast enough." But I apologized. "No, you didn't. You said you didn't mean it the way it came out. You said I was twisting your words. But you never actually apologized for saying something cruel. You never acknowledged how much it hurt me. You just wanted me to get over it and move on." Brandon was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. "What do you want me to say, Zoe? I want you to understand that what you said was wrong. Not just poorly phrased, not just something that came out wrong in the heat of the moment, but actually wrong. I want you to understand that calling your wife uninspiring 3 months after she gave birth is cruel and hurtful and not something you get to just brush off. Okay. It was wrong. Do you mean that, or are you just saying what I want to hear?" He looked up at me then, and for a moment I saw something that might have been genuine remorse. "I mean it. It was wrong to say that to you. And I need you to understand that this isn't just about one comment. It's about how you've been treating me for months. The little criticisms, the lack of support, the way you act like everything that's hard about our life right now is my fault. I don't think it's your fault. Then why do you comment on the messy house without offering to help clean it? Why do you mention that we're out of groceries without volunteering to go shopping? Why do you notice everything that's not perfect but never acknowledge everything I'm doing to keep our family functioning?" Brandon didn't have an answer for that. "I need things to change," I said. "I need you to be my partner, not my critic. I need you to support me through this difficult time instead of making me feel like I'm failing. And I need you to see me as a whole person who's struggling and needs help, not just as someone whose job it is to meet your expectations." "What if I can't?" he asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. I'd been expecting him to promise to do better, to say he'd change, to ask for another chance. "What do you mean? What if this is just who I am? What if I can't be the supportive husband you need me to be?" I looked at him across that conference table, this man I'd married, this man I'd thought I'd spend my life with, and I realized he was being more honest with me than he'd been in months. "Then I guess we both need to figure out what that means for our marriage." We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us processing what had just been said. I love you, Brandon said finally. I do love you. But maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe I don't know how to be what you need when things are hard. Love isn't just a feeling, Brandon. It's a choice. It's choosing to support each other, to build each other up, to be kind even when you're frustrated. It's choosing to see the best in each other even when things aren't perfect. And what if I'm not good at making those choices? Then you learn. You try. You work at it. That's what marriage is supposed to be. Brandon nodded, but I could see in his eyes that he wasn't sure he wanted to do the work. I think, he said slowly, maybe we should take some time to figure out what we both want. What does that mean? Maybe I should stay at my brother's for a while. Give us both some space to think. Part of me wanted to argue, to fight for our marriage, to beg him to stay and work on things with me. But another part of me, the part that had been slowly dying under the weight of his criticism and disappointment, felt relieved. Okay, I said. Okay? If that's what you think we need, then okay. But Brandon, I want you to really think about what you want. Because I can't keep living with someone who finds me uninspiring. I can't keep trying to earn respect and support from someone who's supposed to give those things freely. We drove home separately, and Brandon packed a bag while I fed Caleb upstairs. When I came down, he was standing by the front door with his suitcase. I'll call you in a few days, he said. To check on Caleb? To check on both of you. After he left, I sat in our living room holding Caleb and tried to figure out how I felt. Sad, definitely. Scared about the future. But also, for the first time in months, not anxious about whether I was meeting someone else's expectations. That was 2 weeks ago. Brandon has called a few times, mostly to ask about Caleb, and we've had some brief conversations about practical things like bills and schedules. But we haven't talked about us, about what we want, about whether our marriage can be saved. I've been doing a lot of thinking during these 2 weeks alone with Caleb. About what I want my life to look like, what kind of marriage I want, what kind of father I want for my son. I keep coming back to that word, uninspiring. And I've realized that even if Brandon comes home tomorrow and promises to never say anything like that again, I don't know if I can forget it. I don't know if I can trust him with my vulnerability again. I don't know if I can believe him when he tells me I'm beautiful, if I can feel safe being myself around someone who used my struggles against me. But more than that, I've realized that I don't want to teach my son that this is what love looks like. I don't want him to grow up thinking it's okay to criticize and diminish the people you're supposed to cherish most. I don't want him to learn that a woman's worth is tied to how quickly she bounces back from sacrifice, how well she manages to juggle impossible demands, how attractive she manages to remain while giving everything she has to her family. Yesterday, I ran into my neighbor Clara at the mailbox. She's in her 70s, has been married for 50 years, and she always has a kind word and a warm smile. How are you doing, dear? She asked, noticing that I looked tired. I haven't seen Brandon around lately. We're taking some time apart, I said, not sure how much I wanted to share. I'm sorry to hear that. Marriage is hard work, especially with little ones. Can I ask you something? I said impulsively. In 50 years of marriage, did your husband ever make you feel like you weren't enough? Clara thought for a moment. We had our rough patches, certainly. Times when we were both tired and stressed and said things we didn't mean. But make me feel like I wasn't enough? She shook her head. No, dear. Even during our worst fights, I never doubted that he saw me as his equal, his partner, someone worthy of respect and love. What if he had? What if he'd made you feel like you weren't trying hard enough, like you were disappointing him? Then I would have had to decide if that was the kind of marriage I wanted to stay in. Because you can work through almost anything with someone who respects you. But without respect. She shrugged. What do you have left? That conversation has been echoing in my head ever since. What do you have left without respect? I look at Caleb sometimes and wonder what I would tell him if he ever spoke to his partner the way his father spoke to me. I would tell him that love doesn't tear people down, it builds them up. I would tell him that when someone you love is struggling, you help them, you don't criticize them. I would tell him that a person's worth isn't measured by how quickly they bounce back from difficulty, how well they manage to juggle all the demands on their time and energy, how attractive they manage to remain while sacrificing everything for their family. And if I would tell my son those things, then I have to live them myself. Brandon texted yesterday, I miss you and Caleb. Can we talk? I haven't responded yet because I'm still trying to figure out what I want to say. Part of me misses him too, misses the man I fell in love with, misses the idea of the family I thought we were building together. But I can't unsee what I've seen, can't unhear what I've heard, can't unfeel what I've felt. The people around me keep telling me that all couples go through rough patches after having a baby. My mother-in-law called yesterday and said I was being stubborn and that I should stop punishing Brandon for one mistake. His brother sent me a text saying Brandon was going through something and that I should be more understanding. But here's what I keep coming back to: it wasn't one mistake. It was months of small cuts, months of being made to feel like I wasn't enough, months of having my struggles minimized and my efforts dismissed. The comment about being uninspiring was just the moment when I finally couldn't pretend anymore that everything was okay. I've been reading books about healthy relationships, about what partnership is supposed to look like, about how people who love each other are supposed to treat each other during difficult times. And nothing I'm reading matches what I experienced with Brandon. According to everything I'm learning, when your partner is struggling, you're supposed to offer support, not criticism. When they're going through a difficult time, you're supposed to be their safe place, not another source of pressure. When they're vulnerable, you're supposed to protect that vulnerability, not use it against them. Brandon did the opposite of all of those things. And when I tried to tell him how much it hurt, he made me feel like I was the problem for being hurt. Last night, I finally responded to his text: "I'm willing to talk, but only if you've spent this time really thinking about what went wrong between us. Not just the fight about dishes, but everything that led up to it. And only if you're willing to acknowledge that calling me uninspiring was wrong, not just poorly phrased." He called immediately. "I have been thinking," he said. "Every day. And you're right, what I said was wrong. Not just the way I said it, but the whole thing. It was cruel and unfair, and I'm sorry." It was the first real apology I'd gotten from him, and I felt some of the tension in my chest ease. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot to hear. I want to come home, Zoe. I want to work on this." "What does working on it look like to you?" "I don't know. Maybe counseling? I know I haven't been the husband you need me to be. I know I've been critical and unsupportive. I want to do better. And what about all the people telling me I'm being stubborn and unreasonable? What about your family saying I should just get over it and move on?" Brandon was quiet for a moment. "That's not fair to you. What I said was wrong, and how I handled it afterward was wrong. You're not being stubborn for needing time to process that. It wasn't everything I needed to hear, but it was a start. If you come home," I said, "things have to be different. I can't go back to feeling like I'm constantly being judged and found lacking. I can't live with someone who sees my struggles as character flaws instead of normal parts of life." "I understand." "Do you? Because Brandon, I need you to really understand what the last few months have been like for me. I need you to understand that I haven't been lazy or careless or not trying hard enough. I've been drowning, and instead of throwing me a life preserver, you've been criticizing my swimming technique. He paused. "That's a really good way to put it. And you're right. I should have been helping you, not making things harder. I need to feel like we're a team again. Like we're both working toward the same goal instead of you standing on the sideline keeping score of all the ways I'm not measuring up. I want that too. And I need you to see me as a whole person who's doing the best she can, not just as someone whose job it is to meet your expectations. I do see you that way. Or at least, I want to. I know I haven't been showing it." We talked for over an hour, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was talking to my husband instead of my critic. He seemed to genuinely understand what he'd done wrong, seemed genuinely committed to changing. But I also know that understanding something intellectually and actually changing your behavior are two different things. "I think we should do counseling before you come home," I said finally. "I think we need help figuring out how to communicate better, how to support each other during stressful times." "Okay. I'll find someone." "And Brandon? This isn't just about you apologizing and promising to do better. I need to see actual changes. I need to feel safe being vulnerable with you again. That's going to take time." "I know. I'm willing to do the work." After we hung up, I felt cautiously hopeful for the first time in weeks. Maybe we could fix this. Maybe we could find our way back to being the team we used to be. But I also felt something else, stronger. More sure of my own worth. More clear about what I needed and deserved in a relationship. The word uninspiring will probably always hurt when I think about it. But it also taught me something important about myself. It taught me that I won't accept being diminished by someone who's supposed to love me. It taught me that I deserve a partner who builds me up instead of tearing me down. It taught me that my worth isn't dependent on how quickly I bounce back from difficulty or how well I manage to juggle impossible demands. Most importantly, it taught me that I am inspiring. Maybe not in the way Brandon meant when he said I wasn't. Maybe I'm not inspiring desire or attraction right now. But I'm inspiring in ways that matter more. I'm inspiring to my son, who sees me as his whole world, his source of comfort and nourishment and love. I'm inspiring to myself, because I've discovered strength I didn't know I had, courage I didn't know I possessed. I look in the mirror now and I see a woman who grew a human being inside her body. A woman who endured 18 hours of labor to bring that human being into the world. A woman who has been getting up every few hours for 3 months to feed and comfort and care for her child. A woman who is learning to navigate the most challenging time in her life while her body heals and her hormones stabilize and her entire identity shifts. That woman is not uninspiring. That woman is remarkable. Yesterday I took Caleb for a walk in the park, and an elderly man stopped me to admire him. "Beautiful baby," he said, smiling down at Caleb in his stroller. "Thank you," I said. "You're doing a good job, Mama. I can tell. Happy babies come from happy families." I almost started crying right there on the park path. When was the last time someone had told me I was doing a good job? When was the last time someone had looked at me and Caleb and seen success instead of failure? "It's been a challenging few months," I admitted. "Always is with the first one. But you're figuring it out. Look at him, he's content, he's healthy, he trusts you completely. That doesn't happen by accident." On the walk home, I thought about that man's words. "You're doing a good job." Such simple words, but they meant everything to me in that moment. Because I am doing a good job, even if it doesn't always feel like it. Even if the house is messy and I'm still in my pajamas at 3 p.m. and I haven't lost all the baby weight yet. Even if I sometimes feel overwhelmed and exhausted and like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm keeping my son alive and healthy and loved. I'm learning to be a mother. I'm healing from one of the most physically and emotionally demanding experiences a person can go through. I'm doing all of this while functioning on minimal sleep and with hormones that make me feel like a stranger in my own body. That's not uninspiring. That's heroic. Brandon and I start counseling next week. I don't know what will happen. I don't know if we can rebuild the trust that was broken, if we can find our way back to being partners instead of adversaries. I don't know if he can really change the way he sees me and supports me, or if he'll slip back into old patterns when the pressure is on. But I know that I'm not the same woman I was 3 months ago when this all started. I'm stronger now. More sure of my own worth. More clear about what I will and won't accept in a relationship. If Brandon can do the work, if he can learn to be the partner I need him to be, then maybe we can save our marriage. Maybe we can build something even stronger than what we had before. But if he can't, if he keeps seeing my struggles as failures and my vulnerability as weakness, then I know I'll be okay on my own. Because I've learned something important during these weeks apart, I am enough. Just as I am, right now, in this moment, in this body that created and nourishes my son, I am enough. The word uninspiring tried to convince me otherwise. It tried to make me believe that I wasn't worthy of support, that I wasn't trying hard enough, that I was somehow failing at being a wife and mother. But that word was wrong. I am inspiring, to my son, to myself, to anyone who takes the time to really see what I'm accomplishing every single day. And anyone who can't see that, who looks at a woman 3 months postpartum and finds her lacking instead of remarkable, doesn't deserve to be part of my story. I'm hoping Brandon can learn to see what that man in the park saw, a woman doing a good job during one of the most challenging times in her life. A woman who deserves support and encouragement, not criticism and judgment. But if he can't learn that, then I've learned something even more important. I don't need his approval to know my own worth. I don't need his validation to feel proud of what I've accomplished. I don't need his inspiration to know that I am inspiring. I am a mother. I am strong. I am enough. And that's the most inspiring thing of all.